Hello, welcome to our discussion of Chapter 5, God's Amazing Design. In this chapter, we will talk about how God has designed each individual amazingly different from any other. And the section headings in Chapter 5 highlight these four key differences: what he and she need most, biological gender differences, and we will talk about that in this video, temperament or personality, and your story, your life history. Mike will cover the last two in another video. We're all familiar with the term opposites attract, and this is no truer than in relationships. Sadly, what sometimes happens in a marriage is that those very things that delighted us, that attracted us to our spouse, can tend to repel us later on. We want to be alert to that. We want to be alert to the fact that God made us so different so that we can lend grace to one another. So let's look at the biological gender differences. Gender differences aside, if we see someone else doing something in a way that's different than the way that we do, what do we usually think? Generally, we think, they're not doing that right, are they? Because we tend to measure another's behavior by our own behavior as a standard. That can be a real problem. Emerson Eggerichs, in his book, Love and Respect, says something very profound. It is that our differences are not wrong. They are just different. Another book that is wonderful is a book by Bill Farrell called Men Are Like Waffles and Women Are Like Spaghetti. It's such a great illustration, and hopefully you will recognize it as we go on. I'd like to share a quote from this book. It was in God's plan to make men and women different from each other from the moment He imagined us. The original plan was to use these differences as a starting point for building intimate, fulfilling relationships. But in our sin-filled world, what started out as an advantage has become a frequent source of irritation. Now I want to describe a little bit what is meant by the word waffle and spaghetti as being illustrations of us in our gender. Now, we know that the word waffle can mean unable to make decisions and being unstable, and that is not at all what is intended here. All that is intended here is if we were to look at a waffle, we would notice on the top of the waffle there are lots of little boxes that are separated by walls. Well, this represents how men process life. A man's thinking is divided up into little boxes, and in that box there is room for one issue and one issue only. Unlike women, if you look at a plate of spaghetti and you see all those noodles all wound up together, well, that kind of illustrates how we process. If you look at one strand and you try to follow it around the plate, you may find yourself losing that strand as you intersect many others. And so women handle life in that way. Every thought, every issue is connected to another. That's just how we were designed. That can be frustrating for a man, because when we start talking, we do something that Emerson Eggerichs calls spider webbing. We start on one topic, and that reminds us of something else, and we go there, and then we go there, and there, and there, and there, until we've created this wonderful spider web. But eventually, we get back to the initial idea and speak that. So that can be really frustrating for a man. As you can see, there is great potential for division in that particular difference that we have. But we don't have to let our differences divide us. We have a resource that God has given us, and we know what that resource is. It's His grace. But we must choose to reach out for His grace. 1 Peter 3:7 admonishes husbands to live with their wives in an understanding way, showing honor. I believe the words live in an understanding way, showing honor, apply to us wives as well as to our husbands. And our desire in this chapter is to give you knowledge that will help you with your understanding. We want you to understand and allow that understanding to be bathed in grace toward your spouse. I want to share a few scientific facts about how our hormones wire us very differently. And believe it or not, what I'm about to share is really only the tip of the iceberg. There's a wonderfully hilarious book called His Brain, Her Brain by Walt and Barb Laramore. And it speaks the truth, but it does it in such an enjoyable way. So if you have more interest in this topic, I would recommend that book to you. So, hormones. According to scientific research, a baby boy's brain receives up to 20 times more testosterone than a baby girl's. And much of the male's behavior happens due to the imprinting that takes place at this time in the womb. Now, female babies receive more oxytocin. Oxytocin is the result of what is called the tend and befriend tendency. Males have the fight or flight tendency, and the aggressiveness of a person is likely dependent upon how much oxytocin they receive in development. Now, generally, male brains receive less serotonin than female brains. Serotonin exerts a calming effect on us, so it is more likely that a man will tend to act explosively and compulsively compared to his wife. However, this is also very much affected by a person's temperament and by their life history. Women are more prone to being empathetic and inquire, "How are you feeling today?" This is oxytocin at work. I love oxytocin because oxytocin is what bonds me and has from the time in the womb to my children. They're grown now, but I still have that intense sense of bonding with them. And that's because of oxytocin. That's how God made me. Now, your husband may appear to be deep in thought when in reality, he's just in his nothing box. What did you say? Yes, nothing box. Men have a nothing box in which they can escape to think about nothing. I think it's interesting that because the man is a leader of the home and has so many things that he has to be concerned about, that God gave him a little relief in a place that he can go and just relax. Now, women are better designed to multitask. Again, we're wives, we're mothers, we're homemakers. All these things are going on. I wouldn't say 24/7, but close to it. And so we need to be multitaskers, and that's how God has made us. The other thing is that women's brains virtually never shut off. So when we go to bed at night, we need to consciously take a concern or even a joy and just set it aside for the morning. And it's kind of funny because my husband and I will be having a little brief discussion, and one of us will really want to get to sleep. And so one of us will say to one another, "Honey, it's time to turn off the thinker." My husband is a thinker because of his temperament, but I'm a thinker because I'm a woman. I have all these thoughts in my mind. I don't know about you ladies, but sometimes I do wish that I had a nothing box to escape into. Now, there's another difference that is likely to lead to marital conflict, and that is the ability to process complex emotional information. Compared to women, it may take a man 7 times longer. And I shared that story from our book, how at night, Mike and I were talking about something, and we had this verse as our marital verse, and it was, "Don't let the sun go down in your anger." So we were having a little bit of more than a discussion, and I wanted to get it settled. And so we're sitting there and we're talking, and all of a sudden it gets very quiet on the other side of the bed. And I start hearing breathing. And I realized that Mike has fallen asleep. Well, at that time, I didn't know this. And my tendency was to think, no, it wasn't a tendency, it was a reality. What is wrong with him? He's so insensitive. And so I laid there and I was irritated. So finally I would just get up and go in the other room. And that's when the Holy Spirit had an opportunity to deal with my heart and teach me that not letting the sun go down on my anger was between me and him, and not myself and my husband. I mentioned that a woman's brain is predominantly wired for empathy. On the other hand, a man's brain is wired for building systems and understanding systems. And not knowing this, I remember a number of times feeling such deep empathy for someone and realizing that Mike wasn't feeling anything at all. And it made me feel like perhaps he was a little uncaring, but the reality was that's just not how he's designed. Another thing about a man, and I love this, is that they are designed to be problem solvers, especially in the area of technical things. And today we have so many technical things. But I need to be careful, because if I'm experiencing something at my computer that I need help with, I want to be sure that I'm not going to be interrupting Mike with something that he is working on. Because if I do, generally he will just leave that and come to my escape to help me, because he's designed to be a problem solver. And that problem solving can also tend to have a husband be listening to a conversation and already thinking about the problem solving that he can give to his wife at the end of her discussion. But sometimes we women just need our husbands to listen. And so it's wise to say, honey, do you want me to have a solution for this, or are you just wanting me to listen? That will really help. And just before I finish, I want to say that you may not have recognized yourself in all of the hormonal things we've talked about from development in the womb. And that's okay, because some of us are what's called bridge brains. And that means that maybe we received more of one hormone than another that is typical of our gender. And that's perfectly fine. I don't want you to feel like there's something wrong with you in that. So thanks for taking the time to hear more about this fun subject of biological gender differences. Goodbye for now.